Gene is champing at the bit. For more on Nvidia's record run, Gene Munster of Deepwater Asset Management joins us now. You're listening. Maybe you think you can weigh in on AI, but someone said we can't quantify what this means for Nvidia. You tried to do that, didn't you? You actually, if they are able, how much of that write-off comes back? It reminds me of a bank when they bring back reserves in, and all of a sudden they didn't need to have those reserves.
Right on. So the impact, I think Tim Memmi mentioned a little bit earlier, it was 15% of their business was this lower level chip. Non-direct sales to China is probably another 10%. So think of a quarter of NVIDIA's business is China related. We're talking about that 15%. And so then begs the question, they get back 15% of the business. Why is the stock only up 4% today? In part because this was telegraphed. Jensen was pretty clear that they're going to find some way forward here. But another piece to it, too, is that just given how unpredictable a lot of these developments have been, you hear one thing one day, a few weeks later you get a totally different outcome. You mentioned the Russia impact on this. Investors are also asking themselves, like, is this really going to be back for good? And so that kind of explains that gap between that 15% add back and the 4%. But in general, Joe, this is it's obviously it's good for NVIDIA, but I would put everything I just went through as part of the smaller picture of the news today. There's a much bigger picture that I think is going on in terms of what this means for the broader AI space.
So give me a law of large numbers and what's possible 2, 3, 4 years from now with NVIDIA. What kind of things are we talking? We're talking about $5 trillion, I guess, anyway.
So with NVIDIA specifically is that next year, the street numbers, the analysts that updated their numbers today, not all 40 have updated their numbers, but those that did are looking for 30% revenue growth in calendar 26. Previously, it was 25% growth. They're going to grow by about 60% in calendar 25. And so when I think about how big this can be, I think that ultimately we're going to be 35% better. And ultimately, that probably is going to get us to $5 trillion and greater. And I would just, I mentioned that the bigger picture going on is that there was a huge read, a huge tell in terms of what this means for the broader AI trade. I've been talking over the past few months with a former trade official that worked with Trump on in his first administration around trade. And over the past few months, he's really stressed the importance of NVIDIA in the conversations, especially trying to get some of these rare metals. But the fact that China is willing to use NVIDIA, their junior varsity chips, as a key negotiating piece, the fact that they're willing to accept that, I think really underscores two things. Number one is that U.S. has a substantial lead when it comes to the hardware side. And second is that they recognize the power of AI is going to be so important that they need to take anything that they can around these lower level chips. And so I think that when we ask the question, Joe, about like where does NVIDIA go, I think that we're probably 20% of the way through this build-out. This is going to go on much longer than people think.
Gene, so you talked about the broader AI trade. So put your analyst hat on, and is this the day actually to buy AMD or Taiwan Semi, who the RTX Pro is being built off of essentially their N4 platform? So our investors, should we be focused only on NVIDIA? I don't think investors are, but let's take this away into stocks that are really exposed to this trade.
So on the AMD side is that there is a market share question there. Do they ultimately have the chops? And so I think that TSM is probably a better place to be there. I think if you kind of go down the list and look at other supporting casts around AI infrastructure, where companies like Vertiv that are doing some of the cooling, things like that, I think are part of it. So I can't speak to AMD specifically, but I just again kind of want to anchor is that we constantly talk about AI, but I still think it's hard for us to grasp how early we are.
All right, Dean, and at this point, I mean, what would we get scared of? What was it called? Deep Six or something? Never mind. Someday, no?
We learned a lot about DeepSeek today. I mean, this was a deep fake. The reality was that DeepSeek was all about being able to train advanced models on far less sophisticated hardware. DeepSeek is great. We use these models internally at Deepwater. DeepSeek is great at the lagging, not the frontier models, but all the actions happening on the frontier. And so I think the fact that they need these, again, junior varsity chips, is evidence that DeepSeek really doesn't deliver the yield on that kind of that high-end, most frontier models that we had thought of back in January.